Excerpts from my previous video, where I shared 3 scenarios of unfolding events of the eruption of the magmatic plume located under Siberia, have already flown all over the web. I would like to express my gratitude for the active position and commitment of those who devoted their time and efforts to translate those videos into other languages and share them on various social media platforms. Various kinds of comments and feedback about the previous video have started to reach us. Opinions vary, but one thing is certain. Information about the magmatic plume that can burst at any moment, destroying not only Russia, but eventually most of the planet, leaves no one indifferent. However, in all the buzz after my statement, attempts to drag our organization into the political field have become particularly noticeable. Some criticize and say that we are against Russia. We are for its destruction, while others say that, on the contrary, we are supposedly pro-Kremlin, pro-Putin agents who spread disinformation. Here I would like to stop and ask, are you people out of your minds? Open your eyes and look at what is happening to the climate. What does this have to do with politics? We have said many times, and I am saying it once again, ALLATRA is outside politics. And we have never considered the climate issue or any other issue from the political perspective. Politics only limits us, and, on the contrary, keeps us from doing what we should be doing, analyzing data, studying the climate, and observing the area where the giant magmatic hotspot is located. They've already tried to drag us into politics to ban us on Russian territory. They claim that ALLATRA is allegedly working for the Ukrainian security services, while here, in the Czech Republic and Slovakia, they speak of us as pro-Kremlin agents. The same rhetoric is used in Ukraine. But the paradox is that this disinformation is disseminated about us by the pro-Kremlin agents themselves, or rather by the Russian secret services, using Dvorkin, the leader of the Russian pro-religious organization Ratsiers, which operates under the patronage of the Russian Orthodox Church. I've already spoken about him many times and addressed him directly in one of my previous videos. He's a man who, in the fight for power, in promoting the ideology and superiority of one nation over another, and one religion over all others, has achieved such changes in the Russian legislation which now cause millions of people to suffer both in Russia and around the world, including ALLATRA volunteers. Not only his agents who have infiltrated government authorities, but also law enforcement agencies are committing absolutely inadequate, illegal, and unconstitutional actions on his commands. We know this from the agents themselves who, during searches of our former participants, break into homes of innocent people without warning, force women to lie face down on the floor, or grab men by the hair, exposing their faces to the camera like the worst criminals, and then ask, "Why do you dislike Alexander Dvorkin so much? He's such a respected man in Russia." Former volunteers of ALLATRA are not only subjected to severe persecution by Russian security services, but also publicly dehumanized and harassed. Fabricated criminal cases are brought against them. Moreover, authorities now want to make the organization look extremist. And all of this is only because we once told the truth about the climate and published excerpts from the climate report. Just because in the closed part of the report, there was information about the climate threat directly to the Russian territory. For this inconvenient information for the Russian regime, we were branded as sectarians and cultists. Such a yellow star of modern times, the favorite tool of the Nazis, which in its time became the beginning of genocide of the Jewish people. Let alone Russia with their reviving Nazism under the leadership of Dworkin. But why do you support it? After all, if you react to this kind of Russian disinformation and support it, you are already complicit in the destructive ideology of this country and are actually a part of the totalitarian regime. Do not mock common sense, and do not dishonor yourselves and your own intelligence. Just stop and think, why do they act this way? And why are they so afraid? Do you really think that Kremlin agents simply went crazy and started persecuting innocent volunteers? Are we a competitor to orthodoxy and Putin's power, or what? We're not talking about politics at all. Are we discussing whether Russia is good or bad? No. And we're not discussing whether Putin is good or bad. We're not attempting to encroach on those territories at all. On the contrary, we are talking about how to save them with minimal damage. Let's face the truth of what is threatening all of us. There is a territory with a magmatic plume under it. It's a flow of magma rising from the Earth's depths towards the surface. All of that is confirmed by analyzing and monitoring data. These facts include soil heating in the region, extreme increases in geothermal anomalies, a growing number of gas emission craters in northern Siberia, a rise in the frequency and intensity of wildfires, increased activation of Siberian lithospheric faults, and higher emissions of methane and hydrogen from underground. All of these indicators unanimously point to the fact that the current dynamic warming of Siberia, happening 2 to 3 times faster than the rest of the globe, is primarily due to the increased endogenous heat originating from the planet's interior. The main threat of this region is that if magma, which is currently actively rising from the Earth's depths in this area, reaches the crust, it can lead to a destruction not only of Russia, but of the entire world as we know it, because this kind of disaster would trigger a chain reaction of events, rendering conditions on Earth unlivable. Yes, other scenarios can precede the Siberian magmatic plume eruption, such as a hydraulic impact in the Mariana Trench that we have also discussed. In that case, Siberia will not explode because neither Siberia nor many other parts of the planet would then exist. However, if the hydraulic impact in the Mariana Trench does not occur first, then, as I mentioned earlier, the question of the Siberian magma eruption is no longer whether it will happen, but rather when it will happen. These are not speculations or reflections. The team of ALLATRA researchers in climate change and geodynamics have simply compiled data from open sources, analyzed it, cross-referenced it, and brought this issue to your attention. If you don't believe it, it's only because you haven't examined it. Study the information instead of hyping nonsense, and you will understand that we are right. What we're talking about affects not just our lives, but yours as well. We're making this effort for you because it's still possible to take action to minimize the threat. Yes, we understand the risks involved in carrying out a planned degassing of the Siberian plume on such a scale, but we are also fully aware of the consequences of not doing it. We are being accused of raising awareness about the threat to Siberia, with claims that we are allegedly Kremlin agents. However, it is exactly Kremlin agents who are spreading this kind of disinformation about us. Blaming us is akin to blaming a doctor who diagnoses a patient with stage 4 cancer. A doctor informs a patient's family about the illness, but instead of addressing the problem, they start accusing the doctor. What does the doctor have to do with it? Did he cause the cancer or grow it himself? Should he be blamed for working in the interest of cancer just because he communicates the diagnosis? Similarly, those hysterical individuals whose minds have been thoroughly brainwashed by Dworkin's ideology are trying to accuse us of serving cancer's interests. How? Climate doesn't differentiate between countries, tyranny, or democracy. It doesn't care. So explain. Where is politics in what we're saying? Is it in our words about Russia's territory? Okay. Imagine a multi-story building with numerous apartments in it. In one of the apartments, there is a hotspot, a burning stove, the hottest place in the entire building. That stove may cause ignition at any moment, resulting in a fire that would naturally spread to the neighboring apartments. Consequently, the entire building can burn to the ground. This is what we're drawing your attention to, a problem that affects every single person living in that building, no matter where they are. Meanwhile, we are being told that by pointing out the danger posed by that apartment, we are doing so only because the apartment belongs to someone we disagree with. What does that have to do with any person? Stop thinking politically. The fact that the family living in the apartment has strong political opinions, quarrels with neighbors, and insists that their father isn't a tyrant while their kids march in perfect formation, that's their own business. The main issue is the stove. Turn it off, and everything will be fine. The problem is that it's impossible to just turn off the stove. It's not something you can stop by issuing a decree, banning its action, or declaring it undesirable. And you cannot resolve this threat through political will. The threat is only growing, affecting the entire building and its every resident. That's exactly why we are talking about it. Not because someone on the political stage likes or dislikes someone else. I'll repeat once again. Stop dragging us into politics. Are you so troubled by the fact that we're talking about Russia? Fine. Let's call this territory something else. Suppose the regime changes, democracy returns, freedom of speech is restored, and the rule of law is upheld. Would the magmatic hotspot disappear? Would the climate situation resolve by itself? And would everything magically be fixed? Of course not. Politicians address the interests of nations, each fighting for their own agendas. But when a problem arises in a specific country that impacts the lives of every individual regardless of their location, what do you propose we do? Remain silent? Wait until we all burn alive together with our children? Our apartments are right next to the one with an out-of-control, overheated stove. These apartments are full of innocent people, children, and the elderly. And everyone wants to live. Don't you want to live too? Are your minds so thoroughly programmed by the dominant ideology of that country that you're willing to burn alive for it? As for us, we're not ready for that. Therefore, we're trying to reach out to you and to the rest of the world. We simply don't know how else to explain it to you. If it were any other territory, we would have already made progress because we would be dealing with rational and reasonable people. That's how it works in the civilized world where democratic values are strong and human rights are a top priority. Look at what is happening with ALLATRA on the international stage. ALLATRA presented its climate report at the UN conferences, such as COP16 in Colombia and Saudi Arabia, and COP29 in Azerbaijan. ALLATRA President Marina Atsunova was granted an audience at the Vatican where she personally discussed the issue of climate change as a global problem with the Pope. Following this meeting, the organization and all its volunteers received an apostolic blessing from Pope Francis himself. In Russia, however, attempts to clarify and convey information about the climate threat have only resulted in persecution. Russian agents now orchestrate harassment against us worldwide, stigmatizing us as cultists and sectarians in a manner reminiscent of how Nazis marked Jews with yellow stars during the era of Nazi Germany. In Russia, former participants of ALLATRA are persecuted. Criminal cases are fabricated against them. They are imprisoned and subjected to Nazi-style methods. During interrogations, ribs and noses are broken. People are tortured with electric shocks, suffocated with plastic bags placed over their heads, blackmailed using their relatives, and everything is being done to silence them. Yet, those responsible for the persecution do nothing to address the problem we are talking about. Okay, let's imagine we go silent, and you feel relieved. Yes, you will sleep peacefully, and ALLATRA will no longer speak. However, the stove is still on. It continues to overheat and can explode at any moment and burn everything around it. Yet, when we make these forecasts based on data analysis and mathematical calculations, we are labeled as alarmists who spread apocalyptic narratives and scare people. Are you out of your mind? Why are they opposing and trying to silence us? Because those who are aware of this information believe there's nothing to be done about Siberia. And that degassing involves too much risk. But isn't it risky to leave everything as it is? It's like a person ill with cancer who needs surgery. But instead, doctors would say, maybe it will go away on its own. Let's not operate on him and not tell his family. Meanwhile, when a doctor points out that there's a problem and a chance to save the patient, people start yelling at the doctor as if it's his fault. Please understand, it's not us who turned the stove on. It's not us who created this hotspot. We simply came to see it and pointed out the problem. In this case, we are mere observers. We see what is happening and report on it. These are real data and real facts. Verify them if you have doubts. We always reference studies by scientists and experts from across the globe. Use data from open sources and climate monitoring stations. Compare this data and draw conclusions based on analysis. That's not our data. It's just basic mathematics, physics, and facts. The facts that speak for themselves. Yet, some people say, there's nothing we can do about it. Why are you telling us this? Why are you scaring us? Are you idiots? What do you mean there's nothing you can do? Unwillingness is one thing. But what do you mean saying you're ordinary people? You live in this house, and you need to understand and know where the threat is coming from and what can be done to save your life and the lives of your family. If an apartment next to yours is on fire, and you say, don't tell us about it, I don't want to hear it, we don't have a fire, that doesn't remove you from the problem. We are telling you this precisely for you to understand that the fire won't extinguish itself, and immediate action must be taken. The least you can do now is learn how to act in the events of floods, storms, high winds, earthquakes, or hurricanes. Make sure you have an emergency kit with all the essentials ready. And do not blame the authorities for not providing help. In fact, in most cases, during the first 2 or 3 days after a natural disaster, People are left on their own. What else do you expect if nothing is organized? If you're not prepared, that's your responsibility. Right now, it is crucial to start learning and teaching others how to act during disasters. Those who already are doing this are commendable. If you do not panic and know how to act, it can save your life and the lives of other people. And it's also important to remember that there's no place on Earth where the climate is guaranteed to remain stable and peaceful. Therefore, you should be prepared, no matter where you are. Do you think we're not afraid after all the years of studying the climate situation on the planet? After realizing that the progression of natural disasters inevitably aggravates every year, and understanding the threats posed to us and our children by the eruption of the Siberian plume? If we weren't afraid, would we be doing what we are now doing? Would we be telling the truth and enduring such harsh persecution? Or do you think we enjoy having tons of slander thrown at us, walking around with yellow stars pinned on us, watching democratic principles crumble before our eyes, and seeing our rights trampled on? And all of this is done by agents who work for Russia. While the media publicly accuse us of political bias, of supposedly being pro-Russian. Does no one see this? Does no one care? Just so that we remain silent, right? If you want to silence us and claim that we're wrong, then at least do it in a more respectable manner. Provide reasoned arguments. Carry out an international study of Siberia. Involve researchers. And then openly declare that what we're saying is not a threat, that everything is fine. However, despite the fact that we've had no access to data from the region for over a year, even the external signs make it obvious that the area is only heating up more, and the situation is not improving in any way. From a scientific point of view, mathematical calculations indicate that all of this is leading to a catastrophe. Are we supposed to ignore this and pretend that everything is fine? Based on what? If the climate is getting worse and worse each year. Since ALLATRA has been driven out of Russia, and there's no longer a mechanism to mitigate disasters in that region, the climate situation worldwide has worsened. See for yourselves. Now, every month breaks the records set by the previous month.
Temperature anomalies. Heat waves are becoming more frequent, longer, and intense. In 2024, they broke every possible and impossible record. Starting in late May, the city of Phoenix, Arizona, USA, endured 113 consecutive days of exhausting heat, with temperatures exceeding 37.8 degrees Celsius. This is a new record in the entire history of observations, surpassing the previous record of 76 days, set in 1993. During the next heat wave, which struck the city in September, Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport recorded daily heat records for 21 consecutive days. In June, a tragedy struck Saudi Arabia caused by extreme heat and high humidity. During the Hajj pilgrimage in Mecca, the unbearable heat claimed the lives of at least 1,300 people. This year also saw an increase in the phenomenon known as tropical nights, where nighttime temperatures do not drop below plus 20 degrees Celsius, preventing both people and ecosystems from recovering. In summer, South Korea experienced its longest stretch of tropical nights since the beginning of weather records. From July 22nd to August 20th, Seoul endured 30 consecutive nights with temperatures not dropping below 25 degrees Celsius. In Busan, tropical nights lasted for more than 3 weeks. The most shocking development is that tropical nights are now being recorded even in winter. On the night of December 16th, temperatures in the Canary Islands reached plus 29.6 degrees Celsius. This was a record for the hottest December night ever recorded in the Northern Hemisphere. Temperature fluctuations have also become abnormal. In April of this year, Europe experienced one of the most rapid temperature flips in recorded history. On April 15th, temperatures in Slovenia plummeted by more than 26 degrees Celsius within 24 hours. During the same period, Austria saw summer-like temperatures of 30 degrees Celsius drop to 0 degrees Celsius in just 48 hours. In April, most European countries experienced temperatures hotter than typical midsummer levels, followed by sudden frosts. In early May, the European part of Russia experienced extreme weather chaos. The first 10 days saw record-breaking cold temperatures. Temperatures in some areas dropped to minus 10 degrees Celsius, which is 8 to 10 degrees Celsius below the seasonal average. Even in the south, in Krasnodar Krai, after 30 degrees Celsius heat, snowfall occurred. Abnormal frosts and snowstorms damaged harvests in 41 regions of Russia, destroying over 1 million hectares of crops. Alongside abnormal heat, cold waves are also setting new records. Throughout Argentina, there was not a single area that wasn't affected by abnormally low temperatures in July. In Buenos Aires, on July 6th, temperatures dropped to minus 5 degrees Celsius, compared to the average July minimum of plus 9 degrees Celsius. In some areas, temperatures fell as low as minus 17 degrees Celsius. Even the sea, as well as hundreds of rivers and lagoons across the country froze. Drought. Southern Africa was hit by the worst drought in the past 100 years. Several countries declared a national disaster. For the second consecutive year, Brazil experienced its worst drought on record. Almost 60% of the country's territory was affected, while rivers became very shallow. In 2024, the city of Brasilia had 167 consecutive days without rain. By October, the water levels in the Solimões and Rio Negro rivers, the largest tributaries of the Amazon, reached their lowest levels since records began in 1902. In October of 2024, exceptionally dry conditions affected over 78% of the U.S. population, the highest percentage in the U.S. Drought Monitor's 25-year-long record. Wildfires. The state of Roraima in Brazil is known for its rainforests and humid climate that typically prevent natural wildfires. However, in February this year, more than 2,000 active fire outbreaks were recorded there, 5 times the average for this time of year. In May and June of this year, the Pantanal, the planet's most extensive tropical wetland system, saw a 10-fold increase in the scale of fires compared to last year. The fires scorched approximately 1.5 million hectares, inflicting massive damage to ecosystems, particularly in Bolivia and Paraguay. Wildfire season in the U.S. traditionally peaks from June to September. But in 2024, fires had already destroyed nearly 568,000 hectares by February, setting a new national record for the month. In Canada, large wildfires began as early as March, fueled by so-called zombie fires, smoldering fires that survived under the snow from the previous season. The 149 cases reported this winter marked an all-time high. Southern Europe experienced its worst wildfire season on record. In August of this year, there was a dramatic increase in the area burned by wildfires, with the majority of the damage occurring within just 1 week. This dramatic surge was primarily driven by severe wildfires in Africa, where some 22 million hectares were burned in a single week, accounting for 80% of the global burned area during that time. During the first 9 months of 2024, Russia's Zabaykalsky Krai recorded its largest wildfire area in 15 years. Fires scorched 2.5 million hectares of land. Tornadoes. Over the past few decades, the average annual number of tornadoes in Europe has increased more than 18 times. For incomplete 2024, the number of these events reached 1,017, setting an all-time record for tornado occurrences. The geographic range of tornadoes is rapidly expanding, and they are now becoming increasingly frequent in regions where they used to be exceptionally rare. In Shandong Province, China, the National Climate Center reports an average of 1.5 tornadoes per year. However, on July 4th to 5th, 2024, at least 3 tornadoes swept through the province, several times the annual average. The tornadoes moved at high speeds, uprooting trees, ripping off roofs, and overturning vehicles. As a result, 5 people died and 83 were injured. According to studies, in the past, Russia typically recorded up to 15 major tornadoes annually, with wind speeds exceeding 50 meters per second, and one particularly powerful tornado, with gusts over 70 meters per second. These tornadoes usually occurred in the southern regions of the country. However, in 2024, a whole series of tornadoes were observed much further north, where these phenomena are typically extremely rare. In just June 2024, at least 13 tornadoes occurred in the Pskov, Moscow, Yaroslavl, Chelyabinsk, Tyumen, and Omsk regions. One of the most shocking events was the destructive tornado that occurred on September 28th in the Moscow region. The European Database of Hazardous Weather Phenomena classified it as an IF3, which corresponds to an EF3 tornado. Tornadoes of this intensity in temperate latitudes, especially in autumn, are an exceptionally rare occurrence. Tropical cyclones. Tropical hurricanes, like many other natural disasters, have their own seasonality. Recently, especially in 2024, the hurricane season has been losing its usual boundaries and is becoming increasingly unpredictable. In the Atlantic, the hurricane season runs from June 1st to November 30th, with peak activity in August-September. However, in June 2024, an extremely powerful hurricane formed at the beginning of the season, Hurricane Beryl. In the Atlantic Ocean, it became the only Category 4 tropical cyclone to form in June, and the earliest Category 5 hurricane on record. 12 out of 18 for the season. Named storms in the Atlantic formed after the climatic peak of the season in early September. 7 hurricanes formed after September 25th, the largest number for this period. Normally, by November, hurricane activity declines, and according to the statistics from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, no more than 1 tropical storm forms in this month, with only 1 storm in 5 years reaching Category 3 or higher. However, in November 2024, 2 destructive events occurred: a tropical storm and a Category 3 hurricane. According to recent studies, in 2024, due to the rising ocean temperatures, the intensity of all 11 tropical hurricanes in the Atlantic increased, and their maximum wind speed increased by 15 to 45 kilometers per hour. This resulted in 7 hurricanes reaching a higher category, and 2 tropical storms becoming hurricanes. Category 4, Hurricane Helen hit the state of Florida, USA, on September 26, 2024. It became the most powerful hurricane to strike Florida since record-keeping began. The deadly storm claimed the lives of at least 230 people across 6 states. According to the National Hurricane Center in North Carolina, Helen caused the most severe flooding in the region in the last 100 years. Less than 2 weeks later, another powerful hurricane, Milton, struck the state of Florida. Its intensification rate was one of the highest ever recorded in the Atlantic Ocean. It took just over 12 hours for it to intensify, from Category 1 to Category 5, the highest level. Other anomalies have also been observed in the characteristics of hurricanes. On October 19th, Category 1, Hurricane Oscar, hit Great Inagua Island in the Bahamas. No forecasting model predicted that Oscar would become a hurricane, making its development a surprise. Experts noted its unusual feature. It became the smallest hurricane on record, with a wind field radius of only about 9.5 kilometers, while most hurricanes have wind fields ranging from 40 to 240 kilometers. On September 23rd, the zombie Hurricane John became a true nightmare for the people of Mexico. After almost dissipating and moving into the ocean, it unexpectedly strengthened and struck the country again. In 2024, hurricanes increasingly made landfall in atypical areas, previously considered protected from such phenomena. In the history of observations, only 3 hurricanes have hit the Mexican coastline near Acapulco, 2 of which occurred within 12 months. Hurricane Otis in October 2023 and Hurricane John in September 2024. In October, Creighton became the first typhoon in 47 years to strike the large port city of Kaohsiung, with a population of more than 2.7 million located on the western coast of Taiwan, a region where typhoons rarely make landfall. The energy provided by the overheated ocean is making these storms extremely powerful. Furthermore, their slow movement over land leads to catastrophic amounts of rainfall. Typhoon Yagi had an unusually large outer radius and remained at super typhoon strength for an extended period, almost 64 hours. It brought an enormous amount of rainfall to Vietnam, where the aftermath led to the deaths of at least 300 people, with hundreds more injured. The Philippines faced an unprecedented series of natural disasters. 6 typhoons hit the country in less than a month, 4 of them within just 10 days. These catastrophes claimed the lives of at least 171 people and caused significant damage to the country's economy. Storms. Storm Boris wreaked havoc across Central and Eastern Europe for several days, claiming 27 lives and causing massive destruction in the region. The storm became trapped between 2 high-pressure systems, which is why it lingered in one place for so long, dumping an enormous amount of rain. For example, in some areas of the Czech Republic, over 460 millimeters of rain fell in just 4 days, exceeding the half-year's worth of precipitation. According to a climatologist, parts of Central Europe have never recorded a weather event like this, not just in September, but for any month. The number of storms with wind speeds approaching hurricane strength is rapidly increasing. On November 20th, 2024, a cyclone struck the Pacific coast of the USA and Canada, becoming one of the most intense on record in this region. On Vancouver Island in Canada, wind gusts exceeding 160 kilometers per hour were recorded, equivalent to the strength of a Category 2 tropical hurricane. On March 14th, an extremely powerful cyclone hit the southern regions of Kamchatka in Russia, with wind speeds reaching 60 meters per second, equivalent to a Category 4 tropical hurricane. In 2024, convective storms became catastrophically powerful. China was devastated by deadly convective storms with extreme winds. Fuzhou Prefecture-level city in Jiangxi province was struck by a convective storm, with thunderstorms, heavy rainfall, and winds comparable to a typhoon. This set a new record for the region. On the night of March 31st in Nanchang City, Jiangxi province, a strong wind gust shattered windows in a high-rise building, throwing 3 sleeping people from the 20th and 11th floors. They had no chance of survival. Hail. Convective storms are leading to the formation of massive hail, which not only destroys infrastructure and property, damages crops, but also poses a threat to human lives. In the Mexican municipality of Sabinas, an 8-year-old girl suffered a skull fracture when she was struck on the head by a large hailstone during a storm. Abnormal precipitation and flooding. The number of abnormal rainfall events and subsequent flooding has increased dramatically. In Europe, since 2000, the number of such events has grown more than 53 times. In 2024, compared to the previous year, this increase was 26%. 2023, 8,496. 2024, 10,697. Rainfall records have reached a new level. It has become commonplace for a month's worth of precipitation to fall in just one day. The new reality is an annual rainfall volume falling within just a few days or even hours. In April, in the Iranian province of Sistan and Baluchistan, nearly 4 years' worth of rainfall fell in 3 days, setting a record for the region. In Oman, more rainfall fell in just 1 day than typically occurs over 2 years. In the United Arab Emirates, in the same time frame, 5 years' worth of rainfall fell. In November, the Italian commune of Giara saw nearly a year's worth of rainfall, 400 millimeters, in just 6 hours. It is impossible to avoid catastrophic flooding with such rainfall. A tragic example of this was the deadly flood in Spain. In the Valencia region, more than a year's worth of rainfall fell in just 8 hours, causing devastating floods. More than 220 people lost their lives, and the city streets were turned into chaos with mud, twisted cars, and building debris. The spring floods of 2024 in Russia were a true catastrophe, affecting 39 regions of the country. The most severe situation occurred in the Orenburg region. It was the worst flood in the region's recorded history. Kazakhstan faced its largest floods in 80 years, with 10 out of 17 regions of the country affected. Unprecedented continuous flooding hit southern Brazil starting in late April. The government of the Rio Grande do Sul state classified the situation as the largest disaster in the state's history. 169 people lost their lives to the disaster, and more than 500,000 were left homeless. Snow. Snowfalls in many regions began unusually early, and the amount of snow that fell broke historical records. On November 26th, the Heilongjiang province in China experienced a record snowfall. In the city of Heigang, the largest amount of snow ever recorded for November in the country fell. By Wednesday, in some areas, the snow cover reached nearly 1.6 feet. The southern regions of Africa were hit by a rare snowstorm starting on September 20th, causing chaos on the roads and the closure of border crossings. In some areas of Lesotho and South Africa, snowdrifts reached up to 6.5 feet. Meteorologists called this snowfall extreme due to its unusually late timing and abnormally strong intensity, exceeding the usual snow levels even for the middle of winter, which lasts from June to August in the southern hemisphere.
Do you think this is the peak? That things will calm down afterwards? Unfortunately, they won't. It's only going to get worse. Floods, droughts, powerful winds, earthquakes. It will all intensify and escalate. But while something can still be done about this, what can be done about Siberia, which can put an end to everything once and for all? While you're making plans for tomorrow and even for next year, we have a clear understanding of what is happening in Earth's interior and what can occur at any moment, even right now. We feel like someone sentenced to execution, knowing that at any moment the executioner may come, be it now, in a minute, or in a year. We know this can be avoided. But it critically depends on basic human common sense and the will to live. So tell me, who here is truly apocalyptic in their thinking? Is it us? The ones fighting for life and trying to show you how to survive? Or is it you, falling for Kremlin disinformation that falsely labels us as members of some apocalyptic cult? Believe me, they have something to protect. The fact that they hide our information, ban it, and persecute us globally means they have something to hide. If they were confident that everything in Siberia was fine, that there was no rapid soil heating, and certainly no threat of a mantle plume rupture, who would even care about us? They could simply provide the public with open scientific data on this issue and prove that the problem we're discussing regarding Siberia simply doesn't exist. But that's not what they did. Instead, Kremlin agents have been hunting down ALLATRA volunteers. Russian special services resort to torture, breaking people's noses and ribs, suffocating them with plastic bags, just like in Nazi times. Those Kremlin agents pursue us not only in Russia, but also in Ukraine and other countries, under the guise of anti-cult activities. While in reality, they're simply trying to prevent the truth of what we're saying from being confirmed. Because if it is confirmed, it would mean that everything, their wealth, resources in the ground, and political agenda would be destroyed. So, all this brutal persecution, is it really because we allegedly tried to get hold of their resources? What resources are we talking about here? Excuse me, I'll put it straight. I couldn't care less about your resources or your country. Live as you please. What I do care about is that trouble and catastrophe from your territory can spread here. That's what I cannot ignore. I have children, grandchildren, and I want to live. I don't want to burn alive. I don't want the world to turn into the epicenter of a nuclear explosion like Hiroshima. You know, it feels like the world is now divided into two groups. Rational, reasonable people who share the Vatican's perspective on ALLATRA, and those who have been subjected to destructive conditioning by the Nazi ideology of Dworkins and the Kremlin's agents. They are trying to hold onto their resources, but in the end, everything will burn. So who will eventually get them? It's like being offered $1 billion. Imagine that. A whole billion, entirely yours. But in the morning, you'll have to give your life for it. You'd say, what's the point of having $1 billion if I'm gone by morning? That's exactly the situation with Russia's resources. It's terrifying to think about what's going on in people's minds. They are willing to sacrifice their lives and even their children's lives for an ideology of some absurd nonsense, all so that someone can hold on to their power, their royal lifestyle, and their cozy warm bath. But does that make things any better for you or your family? Bring common sense back. Right now, everyone is focused on the survival of their nations, on political decisions, and on figuring out how to live tomorrow. But how will you live tomorrow when the situation in your home is such that at any moment, the apartment with the overheated stove may catch fire? If this begins to happen uncontrollably, it will be impossible to stop. Yes, we've said that there is a way to make the process of the mantle plume rupture beneath Siberia controllable through a planned degassing, with minimal damage to Russian territory and a carefully managed, safe evacuation of people. There is already global experience in this field, and many scientists have studied and applied similar methods in practice. Yes, this is a chance, but no one wants to take it. No one wants to think in this direction. The feedback we've received from people, unfortunately, is far from reassuring. But at the very least, we could start thinking in this direction and study the issue in greater detail. That is why I reached out to Dworkin, asking for data on Siberia and access to monitoring sensors. In fact, what else can we do if there's no one else to turn to? Yes, this man has brought Russia to its knees, influenced its constitution, and promoted his mutated ideology of Nazism and theocracy not only within the country, but he also created an entire network of agents spreading this ideology successfully across the globe. Yet, now the question is about survival of all humanity, and I reached out to him, hoping that rationality within him would outweigh his thirst for power. He built an empire and wants to conquer the world. But even the empire he has now can be lost very soon. Siberia can erupt at any moment. Many would die instantly. And the aftermath would trigger a devastating ice age where survivors would envy those who died in the first moments of the disaster. Look into history. This has happened before. We have dug as deep as we could and studied it thoroughly. That's why we talk about forecasts and hypotheses. Meanwhile, Russian authorities accuse us of targeting their resources. We don't need their country or its resources. We're simply pointing out that there's an active, overheated stove there that can ignite and cause a planetary-scale catastrophe. However, we are also being told it's not your concern. It's in someone else's house. But doesn't this threaten all of us? It feels like everyone has either lost their sanity or has been conditioned by that country's ideology. If you think Siberia is humanity's stronghold or Noah's Ark, then by all means, go there and start farming. But we regard Siberia as a Titanic. And we're just trying to draw the attention of thinking individuals to this problem. We don't know the exact solution. There are scientifically grounded approaches, but they require detailed, in-depth calculations and must be addressed by an international team of experts and scientists. Open your eyes and look at what is happening to the climate. Some people still say everything's fine with the climate. If you're sitting at home, and your house isn't shaking, flooding, losing its roof to the wind, or otherwise impacted, you might be comfortably watching TV. Yes, maybe it hasn't affected you yet, but how long will that last? A great many people changed their views about the climate only after facing disasters firsthand. Unfortunately, for many, it was fatal. So, are we going to wait until it affects everyone? I'm addressing everyone who is watching this video. Wake up, people. Open your eyes. This is your life. Don't fall for the interest of those who care only about temporary preservation of their resources and power. For 10 years, no one listened to us, and now they have seen for themselves that we were right. Bring back common sense. We have no other home. This is the only one we've got.